What I think is really interesting here is Bassitt is a vocal guy in general. Like, this guy hasn't been shy when it comes to microphones and saying how he feels. And like, he really, this guy wears his heart on his sleeve. In fact, I remember when the Jays first signed him and had Dallas Braden on podcast, and he was talking about how everybody's going to love this guy because you always know where he stands. So, yeah, I think that when he speaks that way with someone he trusts, that, yeah, he's giving you a pretty honest assessment. What I think is really good to kind of try to pick from this, and we got Blair back, is recently there's been the Bo stuff, right? And the Bo stuff has been lingering all season. And Blair, I think you mentioned, it seems kind of obvious at this point that this guy's not happy here when he's sitting in San Francisco dugouts going, and San Francisco is, what does he said? He says, first and foremost, I want to win. That would be the number one thing if I was choosing a team, and the Giants are committed to that, and they're in a position to get the right type of players. You see Nate Pearson, and whatever, it's Nate Pearson, but he talked about how he kind of felt my time was coming on to move from the Blue Jays. Both sides, time to move on, end quote from Pearson. Bassitt's been on the record before on this stuff. Do you think that this is just the normal vibes of a team that had high expectations, that is outside of the playoffs, that is a little bit older, where these guys are upset, or these little leaks that end up coming out about, the room and the clubhouse and the way guys are feeling, that this is more than that? This is more than just a team that's frustrated with losing.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's more than simply a team that's frustrated with losing. What I find good and what I find interesting, because I compare this to 2009 when Cito Gaston took over from John Gibbons and basically had a clubhouse mutiny. I mean, you had Aaron Hill, Roy Halladay, Vernon Wells, Rod Barajas, who was on the team then, going to Paul Beeston, the president, and demanding a meeting at the end of the year and talking about how Cito Gaston, was not responsive and to their needs, and that they found him too negative. I mean, all sorts of stuff. I mean, that resulted in JP Ricciardi being fired as general manager. It was kind of the last straw for JP. And what I'm getting at here is the thing I find interesting, and I guess the thing that would kind of make me be really careful about where Chris Bassitt is, like, ultimately who he's pointing at here, is the fact that so far we haven't heard a lot of dissatisfaction with John Schneider from within the clubhouse, right? You think about John Schneider's tenure. I think, Matt Chapman wasn't happy last year towards the end of the year when John Schneider took him out for a pinch hitter. But by and large, whatever unhappiness there is, so far at least, it hasn't been directed to the manager. So I think that's good, because that suggests to me that the clubhouse itself, now obviously they're not happy, but that the clubhouse itself hasn't turned on itself or hasn't turned on the manager. So that, that alleviates a bit of the sense of a crisis just from looking on the outside. But the natural extension of that, the natural extension of that, how can you tell I was texting with Morosi this morning? The natural extension of that, JD, is that, okay, who is he kind of pointing at? It's got to be the front office, man. It's got to be the front office.
That's it.
And Chris Bassitt would certainly not be the first player to try to use the media to get a message through to the front office, right? Like, hey, we need help here. And I don't know what that says about, the organization. I really don't, but it's just going to add to the sense that, that this is an organization that at the front office level is just kind of, it's just kind of going here and going there and going here and going there. And it's almost like, it's almost like any snake oil salesman that comes along, these guys are going to jump on it, and that is, that's, again, that feeds into the narrative that this front office hasn't been able to contain. I mean, they haven't been able to grab this thing by the horns and try to spin it in their favor. And indeed, at times, and maybe this is a credit to them, at times it seems that they don't care how they're perceived.
I think they don't publicly. They seem to. I don't think privately. Like, that's. When Chris Bassitt, again, if you, he referenced unfixable problems, right? If it was the manager, that's the most fixable thing that has ever been fixable,
Yes.
right? So I can't imagine that a smart guy like Bass is referencing that. And then even if you're going through the comments, that everything he's talking about that the team needs is like front office stuff. It's all front office decisions. This isn't like a hard, like the codex for this. We don't need code breakers. Like he's referencing the front office and the moves that they've made. And then again, talking about the comments around other guys, it brings me back to the Barrios decision and hearing Whit Merrifield speak about it before he leaves and hearing the guys in that clubhouse, the way they felt about that decision. And then Ross and Mark's media conferences where, what did Mark, he had some big thing about the communication needs to be better and we got to figure out who the right guys are in the room and all this stuff. And then that kind of went away and it's another lost year. And it really feels like from that point forward and whatever that slide was at the end of last season, that the wound hasn't closed with these guys, that they're probably frustrated with, I don't know, their level of input or their level of communication with the front office, like that they've got essentially the same gripes that the fans have.
Yeah, look, I mean, just imagine, just look at the Blue Jays media guide and go through the front office and the number of people in it. Who would you go to talk to if you had an issue, if you were a player or a pitcher? Like we're already told that essentially the way it works with the hitting coaches this year is you kind of get bounced around. You spend some time with this guy, then you spend some time with this guy, then you spend some time with this guy, then you're back to this guy, then you go to this guy, then you go to the other guy, then you're back to that guy. This organization spends so much time thinking about how it can be smarter than everybody else that it wastes a lot of energy that should be utilized being smarter than everybody else. And that's, I mean, that's just, to me, that's very much a philosophical thing. Like, I'm not saying, I know that in this day and age, you're never going to have, you're not going to have a 4-person front office anymore, right? You're not going to have the GM as 2 senior advisors, the assistant GM and a director player person. I mean, everybody's got to have a guy who's 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 got to have a guy. That's just the way it is. It's better to have 6 people involved in the decision-making process than 1. That's just the way modern baseball functions. And part of the problem when you find yourself in that situation is, the first thing that happens is people feel the need to defend their jobs. And how do you defend your job? Well, you create more work than may be necessary, right? You hold on to a job in a front office in baseball these days by making everybody think you're really smart and that you're an expert in something that nobody else in the front office is an expert in. And that's just systemic. It's not certainly simply to do with the Blue Jays. A lot of teams are like that. But, yeah, I look at the news conferences that Ross and Mark had at the end of the year last year, and I still believe if someone had gone to Ross and say, Ross, shut up. Let after the Barrios thing, don't say anything until Mark speaks. Mm-hmm. At that point, nobody, honest to God, I don't think anybody wanted to hear from Ross. They sure as hell didn't want to hear from him on a Saturday morning, right? So, or Sunday morning,
and they
didn't
want to hear what he had to say, because when he did, it was like, holy crap, this is like unbelievably bad.
But if you compare, and I understand, look, I'll say this about Mark. Mark comes into Toronto and everybody thinks he's the anti-Alex. And so anything Mark Shapiro says, I mean, it's not going to get the same hearing that anything Alex Anthopoulos says. I get all that. But if the Jays' approach had been after that game, everybody shut the hell up. The president of the team is going to speak on Monday. Let's let him address this situation. After that, if you want the GM to do a news conference and talk about what the next steps are, that's fine. But let the president address the situation with Jose Barrios. I think things would have been looked at a little differently. But Ross wanted to do this news conference. He came in, and I mean, it didn't solve anything. If anything, it just added fuel to the fire. And I'm with you. I don't think this fan base, I don't think a lot of us in the media, as much as we matter or don't matter. I don't think we ever really got closure from what happened in that game in Minnesota. And, there was a comment from Jose Barrios in spring training that I thought was really, really telling. And I'm surprised that it didn't get a little more run than it received. We know that this was talked about before that playoff game. Right? The idea that John Schneider and Ross Atkins, that they blindsided the players by doing this is bull. The pitchers knew that this was a possibility, that this is how the Jays were going to play this out. But, Jose Barrios in spring training was asked about it, and he said, yeah, we talked about it. And I'm paraphrasing him here. Yeah, we talked about it, but I was pitching so well that I didn't think that it would, that it would come to pass or that the plan was still in effect. And I think that's what happened in this situation. And I don't think we've ever really, had closure from that. I think it's created an issue. It's created, I think, actually it was Morosi yesterday, I think maybe used the phrase, there's a trust deficit right now.
Yeah.
Between the front office, the players, the fans, and everybody. There really is a trust deficit, and part of it goes back to that.
Yeah, but when it's your players, I think you're cooked. So
absolutely.
My reference to this is if you're a player and you lose in a heartbreaking fashion, I think you can bounce back from it because you go, man, I could have controlled something better. I could have thrown a better pitch there. Like I made the mistake. But if it's on the coaching staff or the front office, I think it's harder to forget it. And the closest reference I have to it is I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, and I watched Pete Carroll decide to not hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch on a 1-yard line in a Super Bowl. And the players never let it go. And again, it's the Super Bowl and it's the 1-yard line versus a wild card game. But even still, it wasn't in the players' hands. If you would have asked those players, every single one of the Seahawks, outside of maybe Russell Wilson, would have been like, hand the ball to the guy named Beast Mode and let him punch it in from the 1-yard line. Much like that decision was, hey, let the guy who's cruising, who we pay big bucks to, finish this ball game. Let him pitch. Let him be the one that decides it. And now to enter this year where all of a sudden things aren't working out right, you have that exciting offseason where all of a sudden you guys think Shohei Ohtani's on the plane too. I think that the parallels, the way that these guys feel is in some ways probably worse than the fans. And so my next question to you is like, okay, so The Athletic, right? They run this poll. And out of 40 executives across Major League Baseball, Atkins Shapiro gets 0 votes. It's anonymous when it comes to the best front office rankings. And by the way, there's points for 1 through 5 in this rankings. The players are pissed off. The fans are pissed off. Like, why are we still doing this? Like, why is this still so, like, pretty much consensus that this is going to be run back during the offseason? That's the part of this I just don't get. I don't understand.
Part of it is because Mark Shapiro, right now, at least, I think. He's got the ultimate. He's got the ultimate power here. He's got a year left in his contract. That's another story that's kind of interesting.
GM's got more term.
GM's got more term, and that's not Mark's a sharp guy. That's not by accident. Mm-hmm. It's always good to leave yourself in a position where one of the selling points you can make to your employers is, well, the other guys that I hired are going to be here the year after me. So, believe me, that is in no way accidental. Mm-hmm. But that's that's another issue. Look, at some point, Mark was able to sell people on the idea that he was focused on the ballpark. And I take him at his word. I think he was focused on the ballpark. I know people get sick of the ballpark, but you know what? I keep telling people, getting this ballpark up to snuff, up to major league standards, and getting it in a position where it can generate a lot of revenue. Quite frankly, for the long-term best interest of this organization, that's more important. That's more important than signing Vladdy, because that's going to be paying off 4, 5, 6 years down the road when Vladdy's not. that was big because the Rogers Center was not the Taj Mahal. Let's be honest. It was not the Taj Mahal. So that was important. Now that work is mostly done, the focus has to be on the field. And now we're talking about Mark Shapiro, the baseball guy. And as long as he has the absolute say in this organization, I think this is going to be kind of where we are. And I don't know, absent somebody above Mark stepping in and taking control of this thing, or saying, you've had however many years of doing this. We've had no postseason success, 8 years. Let's try this, hint, hint, hint. Unless that happens, I don't know where we go.
Yeah, I'm surprised that there isn't a stepping in above at this point, because to me, you still have this equity from 2015 and 2016. Like, there's still a large part of the fan base that just loves the Blue Jays and was reinvigorated by that time. And the ballpark has been good enough and interesting enough that people want to spend time there. Like, I've said this a lot, but as many things as there are in the city, Blue Jays fit for everybody. They fit for a family. They fit for you meeting up and catching up with your friend. And now that they've got these social areas and all these bars, like, it's been a real hit in terms of, hey, do you want to go down to this ballpark regardless of the product? But now people are starting to feel pissed off to a different degree, going, wait, so how many years of this losing and the same thing and being told something that, no one agrees with? When it's, again, now when it's your players that are saying the same things as the fans, this isn't even like the Leafs. Like, the Leafs players are at least on brand, going, no, we all believe that it should be us four guys that just play here in perpetuity, regardless of what the actual outcomes are. We also believe, like the front office, that this is just a string of bad luck. It doesn't seem like the Blue Jays players are on the same page. Seems like Chris Bassitt, one of the most vocal guys and one of the more respected guys saying this stuff, should matter. Okay, so before we wrap up, you've been generous with your time. You got your own show today. He did mention the miles on the tires, though, and I do have a bit of point of curiosity with what they're going to do with these arms, because Gossman yesterday, the velo's down again, and whatever, he's been up and down. He's been pitched well, but ultimately he, Barrios, and Bassitt, like, they throw a lot. Jays don't have a ton of other great options, obviously, but the season's lost. Do you think that, they're already talking about this, shutting down arms or going to a six-man rotation, finding ways to keep a few more miles off the tires?
Yeah, I don't think they have a choice. On the to-do list, we're in the position with this team right now where we're almost at the point where we're saying, okay, yeah, they could be better, but okay, they could be better here, but there's more to do. The first thing you have to do is they absolutely positively have to dress the lineup. Like, God love David Schneider and all these guys, but I can't have five of these guys in the lineup next year, and be a serious contender in the AL East. At best, of all the guys they have here right now, at best, I'm looking at Spencer Horwitz as my everyday second baseman, Will Wagner's a bench guy, and Joey Loperfido is the bench guy. I honestly, beyond that, from what I've seen so far, I don't see. I gotta
tell you that felt like one too many to me. So yeah.
Well, you know what? If I'm carrying guys on the bench, I want lefty dudes with speed. And left-hand hitters who are athletes. Joey Loperfido, I'd rather have a left-hand hitter as my fourth outfielder, frankly, than a right-handed hitter. And same thing with Will Wagner. And Spencer Horwitz, I'm okay with him at second base.
He's fine.
Because I need help behind the plate. I need at least two legitimate thumpers in the middle of the order. And I need a completely reworked bullpen. It's possible that Brendan Little and Ryan Burr...
No, it's not.
Maybe one of those guys,
sorry, that's what's possible. Okay, sorry, I should let you finish. I thought you were like, they could build a credible bullpen. I was like, no.
I like Cabrera. Who the hell knows what Jordan Romano's going to be like, but they need at least another power arm for the back of the bullpen. And I don't know if you're going to do all that. I don't know how you address starting pitching as well. I don't know how you address younger starting pitching. My thought process is you probably bring back those guys, maybe at the trade deadline, go out and add another arm. At some point, you got to trade Bo. At some point, you can't play out next year with both Bo and Vladdy hitting free agency. You just can't. One of the two has to be traded. In an ideal world, you trade one of those guys, you get somebody's arm nearly ready for the majors, plus a younger guy that you can stick in your minor league system who's maybe your top prospect. Like these are the things that the Jays have to do. So I guess what I'm saying is when I look at where they are now and where they have to get the next year, I'm almost thinking, why not run it back with these same starters? It's kind of the easiest thing to do. I'm already paying them. They're already under contract. They're acclimated here. But I mean, let's be clear. There's a lot of work that needs to be done this offseason. And while they're doing that, the Orioles are going to get a year older, and a lot of those guys like Kobe Mayo are going to get closer to being everyday players in the majors. The Red Sox are better than we thought they'd be this year. They're going to be better next year. The Yankees are the Yankees. And, of course, Tampa Bay has had such a down season that they're probably going to win the AL East next year. So there's a lot of heavy lifting that needs to go on here. And as a result of that, I think the Jays are probably going to have to be running on those old tires for at least another year.
Some might call it unfixable. Jeff, thanks for making time today, man.
No worries, man. Be well.
Yeah, you too. Jeff Blair.